Here's your rule book. My mom smiled at Thanksgiving, 27 pages on how I should dress, speak, and serve the family. So I gave her a gift back, foreclosure papers. Now they're screaming thief from their one-bedroom condo. It's funny how you can spend decades believing you're part of something, only to discover you were never more than an ATM with a pulse. That realization didn't hit me all at once. It built slowly, like interest on a loan I never agreed to take out, until that Thanksgiving evening when my mother slid a 3-ring binder across the dinner table. "Nathan," she said with that saccharine smile that never quite reached her eyes, "if you want to eat with us again, there are some things we need to address." The table fell silent. My father studied his plate with sudden fascination. My brother Jason smirked behind his wine glass while his wife Vanessa looked anywhere but at me. Only my grandmother, seated at the far end, seemed genuinely confused by what was happening. I stared at the binder. Its cover read Family Harmony Guidelines in my mother's perfect cursive. Inside were 27 laminated pages of rules specifically for me: how to speak, when to visit, what gifts were appropriate, how I should dress. Even a section about my attitude problem with helpful solutions like remember that family knows best and be grateful for guidance. "Is this a joke?" I asked, though I already knew it wasn't. "It's for your own good, Nathan," my father chimed in, finally looking up. "We've all discussed it, and we feel—" "All," I interrupted, glancing around the table. "Well, your mother and I, and Jason, of course. We're concerned about you." Jason nodded solemnly, the picture of fraternal concern, though his eyes gleamed with something else entirely. Something that looked suspiciously like triumph. "I see," I said quietly, closing the binder. I should have walked out then. Should have taken that binder and tossed it in the nearest trash can along with any illusions about my place in this family. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled, excused myself to use the bathroom, and had what can only be described as an out-of-body experience as I stared at my reflection. The man looking back at me was 34 years old. He'd paid for his brother's college tuition when their parents claimed financial hardship. He'd covered the down payment on this very house when his parents decided to upgrade 10 years ago. He'd funded family vacations, paid off credit card debt that wasn't his, and last year he'd even purchased the luxury SUV his mother now drove because she deserved something nice for once. That man, me, had been the family safety net for so long I'd forgot what it felt like to not have someone clinging to my ankles. I returned to the table, ate my mother's dry turkey, and listened to Jason boast about his latest promotion, a position at a company where our father was on the board of directors. I nodded and smiled like everything was normal, because in this family it was. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that I discovered the emails. I'd stopped by to drop off some paperwork my mother had asked me to review, something about the house insurance that she claimed was too complicated for her to understand. While she made coffee, I used her computer to print the documents I'd brought on a flash drive. That's when I saw it, an email thread still open on her desktop. The subject line read, "Ray, Nathan trouble how to handle." I shouldn't have looked, but knowing what I know now, I'm glad I did. "I think the binder is a perfect idea, Elizabeth," my father had written. "He's always been difficult, but lately it's like he expects recognition for doing what family should do anyway. The money isn't even the issue, it's his attitude." My mother's response, "Exactly. I've raised 2 boys, but only one of them understands family obligation. Jason never questions when we need help. Nathan acts like he's doing us some grand favor every time he opens his wallet. The binder will help him see how selfish he's being." And then Jason's contribution. "Mom, Dad, don't worry about Nathan. He'll fall in line like always. He's too desperate to be loved to ever really say no to us. Vanessa thinks we should ease up on him, but she doesn't understand our family dynamic. When we need the beach house renovated next spring, he'll write the check. He always does." I don't remember printing my documents. I don't remember drinking the coffee my mother made. I do remember driving home in complete silence, no radio, no phone calls, just the sound of my own breathing as I tried to process what I'd read. They thought I was difficult, selfish. They'd created an entire strategy to manage me like I was a problematic employee rather than family. And the beach house renovations. That property had been left to both Jason and me by our grandfather, but somehow Jason had taken over as if it were solely his and now expected me to fund its upkeep. That night I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my financial advisor. The second was to a real estate attorney. What I learned changed everything. 10 years ago, when I'd helped my parents with the down payment on their house, we'd set up what my father called a little family arrangement. They couldn't qualify for the mortgage on their own, so I'd co-signed. But it went beyond that. Technically, I owned 51% of the property, making me the majority owner. It had been structured this way for tax purposes. My father had explained, promising they'd refinance once their finances improved. They never did. Instead, they'd taken out 2 home equity loans against the property. Loans I knew nothing about but was legally tied to as the majority owner. The second revelation came from my conversation with my financial advisor. Over the past 15 years, I had loaned my family approximately $650,000. The beach house renovations Jason mentioned would push that well over $700,000. None of it had ever been repaid, despite vague promises that they would make it right someday. I spent the next 2 months compiling records, bank transfers, emails, text messages asking for small favors that always involved my credit card. I created my own binder, less decorative than my mother's, but infinitely more damning. I also learned through a casual conversation with Vanessa that my parents and Jason had been discussing how to remove my name from the house title without my knowledge. Apparently, Jason had found a guy who handles these things. His words, not mine. They were planning to forge my signature on the paperwork. The betrayal should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt oddly calm, like I'd finally received confirmation of something I'd always suspected but never wanted to believe. My mother's birthday fell on a Wednesday in January. I sent flowers in the morning, roses, her favorite, with a card promising a special delivery later that day. At precisely 3:30 p.m., when I knew she'd be home alone before my father returned from golf, a courier delivered an envelope containing foreclosure paperwork. I didn't answer her calls, or my father's, or Jason's increasingly threatening voicemails. Instead, I waited until the following Sunday, the day of her birthday dinner at her favorite restaurant, where I knew the entire family would be gathered. I arrived 20 minutes late, dressed in the suit she always criticized for being too flashy. Everyone fell silent as I approached the table. "Nathan," my mother said, her voice tight. "We need to discuss that. Paperwork. There's been a terrible mistake." "No mistake," I replied, taking the only empty seat directly across from her. "I've decided to call in my investment." "What investment?" Jason snapped. "It's Mom's birthday, for Christ's sake." I smiled and ordered a scotch from a passing waiter before answering. "The investment in this family, all $650,000 of it." The color drained from my father's face. "Son, you can't possibly." "I'm not your son right now," I interrupted, my voice steady. "Right now, I'm your creditor, and as the majority owner of your house, I've decided to sell the property." My mother's hand clutched at her necklace, a diamond pendant I'd given her 2 Christmases ago. "You wouldn't." "Why not? According to your emails, I'm difficult and selfish anyway. Might as well live up to my reputation." Jason leaned forward, his face flushed with anger. "You went through Mom's emails? That's a new low even for you." "Speaking of lows," I countered, "how are those beach house renovations coming along, still planning to forge my signature on the title transfer?" Vanessa's sharp intake of breath confirmed what I already knew. She hadn't expected me to find out. I pulled out my phone and slid it toward the center of the table, displaying a banking app. "I've calculated exactly what this family has taken from me over the years. Every dollar. I've also withdrawn my financial support from the following: Dad's golf club membership, Mom's luxury SUV lease, Jason's beach house insurance, and the family cell phone plan that I've somehow been paying for since 2010. The waiter returned with my scotch. I took a sip, savoring both the burn of the alcohol and the stunned silence around the table. "You can't do this," my father finally said. "We're family." "Funny, that's exactly what I thought every time you asked me for money," I replied. "Every time you called me difficult while cashing my checks. Every time you created a literal handbook for how I should behave if I wanted the privilege of eating dry turkey at Thanksgiving." My grandmother, who had been silently watching this exchange, suddenly laughed, a short, sharp sound that drew everyone's attention. "Good for you, Nathan," she said, raising her wine glass in my direction. "About damn time." "Mom," my mother looked scandalized. Oh, be quiet, Elizabeth. You've been bleeding that boy dry for years. We all knew it. I just never thought he'd finally stand up for himself. She turned to me. I'm proud of you. Jason wasn't ready to concede. You're really going to make Mom and Dad homeless over what, a few loans that you could clearly afford? Some hurt feelings. I took another sip of my scotch before answering. They won't be homeless. They'll just need to downsize considerably. The foreclosure gives them 60 days to vacate. I suggest they start packing. And what about family? My mother asked, tears welling in her eyes, tears I once would have done anything to prevent. Does that mean nothing to you? It means everything to me, I said softly. That's why this hurts so much. But I've realized something important. I wasn't part of this family. I was its bank. And banks eventually close accounts that only make withdrawals and never deposits. I stood up, dropped enough cash on the table to cover a dinner I wouldn't stay to eat, and looked at each of them one last time. Happy birthday, Mom. Consider your binder officially returned. The next 2 months were a war zone of legal threats, tearful voicemails, and flying monkeys in the form of distant relatives suddenly concerned about poor Elizabeth and Richard. I changed my phone number twice. I moved to a new apartment. I even took a leave of absence from work to avoid the possibility of my father showing up at my office, which he tried to do anyway, only to be escorted out by security. Jason's tactics were more direct. He slashed my tires. He created fake social media accounts to spread rumors that I was mentally unstable. When those efforts failed, he tried a different approach, sending Vanessa to reason with me. "They're your parents, Nathan," she said when I reluctantly agreed to meet her for coffee. "Whatever they've done, they don't deserve to lose their home." Did they send you to say that, or was it Jason's idea? She had the grace to look embarrassed. Jason doesn't know I'm here. But he suggested it. She nodded. Did he also suggest you mention how they're struggling to find a place they can afford? How my mother cries herself to sleep? How my father's health is suffering from the stress? Her silence was confirmation enough. Vanessa, do you know why they can't find an affordable place? Because they've spent the last decade living beyond their means. My means, actually. They could have retired comfortably on what they earned if they hadn't insisted on keeping up with the Joneses using my wallet. I know, she said quietly. That stopped me, you know. She fidgeted with her coffee cup. Jason and we've had problems because of his spending. He thinks money appears by magic. When I try to budget, he accuses me of not understanding how his family works. Last year when our furnace died, he called you before even discussing options with me. Like you were the obvious solution, not a loan or our own savings. I hadn't expected this level of honesty from her. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you're right to do what you're doing, even though it's causing chaos. She looked up at me, her expression serious. But there's something you should know. They're planning to contest your ownership of the house. Jason found some lawyer who thinks there's a case for proving you were just a straw buyer and never intended to have actual ownership. It won't work, I said, though I made a mental note to alert my attorney. The paperwork is clear. Maybe, but they're desperate. And Jason, she hesitated. He's talking about claiming elder abuse, saying you coerced your parents into financial arrangements they didn't understand. I almost laughed. My father, a retired financial services executive, claiming he didn't understand a mortgage arrangement. It would be absurd if it weren't so infuriating. Why are you warning me? I asked. Vanessa looked down at her hands. Because I'm tired of the lies, and because what they did to you was wrong is wrong. She stood up to leave. I should go. Jason will wonder where I am. Thank you, I said, for being honest. She nodded once, then hesitated. Nathan, for what it's worth, I never agreed with that stupid binder or any of it. After she left, I sat there for a long time, thinking about family and loyalty, and where mine should have been placed all these years. They moved out on day 59 of the 60-day notice period. I know because my attorney informed me the keys had been turned over to the real estate agent I'd hired to sell the property. I never went back to see the house. I didn't want to know if they'd damaged it out of spite or left it immaculate as one final attempt to prove I was the villain in this story. The beach house was a separate battle. Jason tried to claim I had verbally surrendered my ownership to him years ago. When that failed, he attempted to buy me out with money he didn't have. Eventually, my attorney proposed a solution. We would sell the property and split the proceeds. Jason refused at first, but reality and his mounting legal fees eventually forced his hand. Through all of this, my grandmother remained my unexpected ally. She called weekly, not to pressure me about reconciliation, but to check on my well-being. "They made their bed," she said during one such call. "Now they're mad they have to lie in it." "I never wanted it to come to this," I told her. "Of course you didn't," she replied. "You're a good person, Nathan. That's why they were able to take advantage of you for so long. Good people assume others think like they do." 3 months after the foreclosure, she invited me to lunch. She was 84 and still sharp as a tack, living independently in the house my grandfather had left her. "I've made some changes to my will," she announced over dessert. "I wanted you to know." "Grandma, you don't have to." She raised a hand to stop me. "My house will go to you when I pass, not your mother, not Jason, you." "They'll contest it," I said immediately. "They'll say I manipulated you." She smiled, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Let them try. I've had my attorney document my reasons extensively, and I've recorded video testimony explaining exactly why I'm making this decision. No judge in the world would overturn it." I felt tears prick at my eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you deserve it," she said simply. "And because I want you to know that at least one member of this family sees you clearly and values you for who you are, not what you can provide." 6 months after Thanksgiving, I received a text from Vanessa. She and Jason were divorcing. She didn't offer details, and I didn't ask, but I wished her well and meant it. A week later, she called me. "There's something you should know," she said, her voice tense. "Your parents are telling everyone that you stole their retirement fund. They're saying that's why they had to move into that small condo and why they can't help Jason financially during our divorce." I sighed. "Are you surprised?" "No," she admitted, "but I thought you should know the story they're spreading." "Thank you, but honestly, I don't care anymore. The people who matter know the truth." After we hung up, I realized I meant it. I genuinely didn't care what story they told themselves or others about why their golden parachute had failed to open. The emotional weight I'd carried for decades, the obligation, the guilt, the desperate need for approval, had finally lifted. I sold my apartment and bought a modest house in a different state. I changed jobs, finding a position that paid less but offered a better work-life balance. I started therapy, where I learned that what I'd experienced had a name: financial abuse. I'd been conditioned since childhood to equate my worth with what I could provide, trained to believe love came with invoices attached. My grandmother came to visit my new home that summer. As we sat on the back porch watching fireflies, she asked if I ever regretted my decision. "No," I said honestly. "I regret that it took me so long to make it." She patted my hand. "Some lessons take longer to learn than others. The important thing is that you learned it." I think about that conversation often, especially now that she's gone. She passed peacefully in her sleep last winter, leaving me not just her house, but also letters from my parents and Jason that I was instructed to deliver after the funeral. I never asked what those letters contained. Some boundaries deserve to remain intact. My mother tried to approach me at the funeral. I simply walked away. My father didn't even attempt contact. Jason glared from across the room but stayed put. Whatever relationship we once had has been reduced to occasional legal communications when absolutely necessary. Do I miss having a family? Sometimes. But then I remember I never really had what I thought I had. What I miss is the illusion, the dream of belonging that kept me writing checks and accepting blame for years. These days, I've built something better, authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than what I can provide. A small circle of friends who know my story and still manage to see me as more than its protagonist. A life defined by choices I make for myself, not obligations created by others. The binder my mother presented that Thanksgiving lives on only in my memory. But in a way, I'm grateful for it. Without that moment, that perfectly crystallized example of how they viewed me, I might have continued funding their lives indefinitely, might have kept believing I was the problem. Sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is showing you exactly who they are, even when it hurts. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is believe them. And sometimes the best revenge isn't foreclosure or legal battles, or even cutting contact. The best revenge is finally closing the ledger of debts and walking away. Because despite what my family believed, some things should never be for sale. Self-respect is one of them.